Hello folks, welcome back to the channel. So no, you are not seeing things. Sim Update 15 did actually launch. So in today's video we're going to go through some benchmarking data that I took prior to Sim Update 15 launching on Sim Update 14, which is on the left hand side of your screen, and of course we've got Sim Update 15 on the right hand side of your screen. So right now we are in the Airbus A320 from Fenix on approach into Gatwick, runway 08 right. Now this is the free version of Gatwick from flightsim.to, so as we always say when doing benchmarking here, this is kind of like a worst case scenario. We've got a really heavy hitting plane, we've got a heavy hitting airport, so we can kind of get a good sense of what's going on. Looking at the numbers though, there's not a huge amount in it, is there? I mean, it's more or less identical numbers. The 0.1% lows are maybe just a touch higher on Sim Update 15, but I mean, you know, if you were to run this again and again and again, I would imagine maybe those numbers would be different run by run, so maybe don't read too much into that. Let's cut forward to where we come into touchdown and see how the numbers are looking there. Okay, so now we are coming into land. We're on very short final here, and the numbers are basically identical. You could argue, in fact, that Sim Update 14 is performing better, albeit only by a frame or two. I mean, you know, we're splitting hairs here, of course, but that's an interesting result. I did wonder whether we would actually see anything or not, because so much of the time in the sim we are CPU limited. Look at the frames per second counter there at the bottom of the screen, both of them limited by main thread. Now we should probably talk about my settings that I use. I run at 4K with TAA enabled, and I use DLSS frame generation. However, now is a good point to mention that the frame counter at the bottom is provided by the sim, and it cannot count the frames that NVIDIA inserts through its frame generation. However, at the top there you can see the frames are much higher. That's because that frame counter, that's MSI Afterburner, that can count the frames that NVIDIA frame generation generates. All the other settings I max out, and I run at a level of detail of 200. But yeah, as you can see, very similar results here. So let's move on and see what happens in LAX. Alright, so now we've changed planes. We are in the PMDG Boeing 737-800 and we are coming into lander LAX. This is just the default LAX, nothing, no fancy add-ons here, just the default one that you can all get. So looking at the frames per second, again, it's kind of similar, isn't it? The averages are a little bit higher on Sim Update 15, albeit at the moment the 1% lows and the 0.1% lows are quite a bit lower. So again, we will cut forward to a little bit closer to the landing and see how the numbers fare then. Okay, so now we're a little bit closer to landing, and you can see it's very similar. The average is a little bit higher on Sim Update 15, which is nice to see. 1% lows and 0.1% lows are the... Oh, hang on. The 0.1% low just had a massive dip on Sim Update 15. So it seems that it is still Microsoft Flight Simulator after all. And I'm only now realising that I haven't quite aligned this footage correctly, which is very annoying, but a little bit late in the day now to fix it, so please accept my apologies. But as you can see, the 1% lows, very similar, 55 versus 53, and the 0.1% lows obviously took a hit on Sim Update 15 because of that 6 FPS that we dipped down to. But otherwise, and including the averages, maybe a little bit better on the averages for Sim Update 15, but I kind of feel like this could change run to run. It's very close, very close indeed. Okie dokie, we're now coming into land into Edinburgh, and we are in the PMDG 737-800 once again. Similar story to LAX, we're getting a little bit more on the averages. Now it's important to note that the averages and the 0.1% lows to 1% lows, they've all been being measured from like 5 or 6 miles out on final, so they have been running for quite some time prior to what you're seeing here. But it's very close, isn't it? Very close. 0.1% lows within like 1 FPS of each other, 1% lows within 2. The average is, yeah, okay, we're maybe like 4 FPS above that, but I think it's very close. I don't think this is like a landslide victory for either side here, so let's move along and see what happens when we introduce something like VATSIM and FSLTL into a place like Gatwick Airport again, because I think there's some more to see there. Okay, now full disclosure, this is not going to be a particularly scientific test, but it is one that I wanted to do because I find whenever I do a live stream and we're on VATSIM and we are at Gatwick, my FPS can really hit the floor, especially when we kind of get pushed back from the gate and we taxi our way down to the runway. Now I'm connected to VATSIM right now in observer mode, so I'm not upsetting anybody, I'm not getting in the way of this Eurowings plane there. So when you go onto VATSIM, of course, I use FSLTL, which is how that plane had the Eurowings livery, because it's kind of looking at what all the information's coming out of VATSIM and then model matches correctly. Really clever stuff, but look at my frames per second. Particularly, look at what the sim is giving us. We're below 30. Now, my target when running the sim is I like to get 4K 60 with frame gen. I appreciate that they're not all kind of real frames in air quotes, but generally you want to be above 30 coming out of the sim, and as you can see now 27, 28, and this is kind of what I used to experience on sim update 14. You know, during the live streams I'd flick on this FPS counter just to kind of see what the damage was. You can kind of tell sometimes that the sim's running a bit bad, and almost always it's when it's a busy night on VATSIM at Gatwick, and it's a busy night on VATSIM at Gatwick. But it's a really hard thing to test because you're not going to get the same night twice at Gatwick. You know, different planes, number of planes, you know, lots of variables, and it's quite hard. However, it was interesting to note that during one of the developer live streams, I think they were saying a large part of the performance improvements they were making to sim update 15 was the memory management system, and I think a lot of that came from the fact that they're trying to improve the ATC and kind of AI traffic within the sim itself, which is kind of what highlighted the issue. When all the stuff gets loaded in, it causes massive memory problems. So I did wonder whether we would get the same benefits when we're on VATSIM, because obviously it's loading in loads of planes and there's stuff moving around, and you know, I wondered whether we'd get the same benefits, but I'm not sure we are, to be quite honest. We're still kind of in the 20s here, taxiing around in Gatwick, and pretty much as it was in sim update 14. So what are we to say about all of this? I don't think maybe my expectations were wrong based on everything I heard, but I don't really feel like we've had much of a performance increase. It's been very, very similar across the board when we do side by sides, and when we connect to VATSIM and taxi around at Gatwick, it's the same story as it was with sim update 14, kind of, you know, mid to high 20s, and that's that. And you know, we're still getting the same result in sim update 15. Now, will it improve over time? I don't know, but I'm curious to hear from you all, to see what your experiences are, because it may be that, you know, or maybe on more modest systems you might see more of a benefit. I don't know. I'm running on a 5800X 3D and a 4080 Super, but as you can see, most of the time I am main thread limited. So I did wonder whether having the memory management overhaul in sim update 15 would help, because kind of often RAM and CPU go hand in hand, whereas if you're GPU limited, then you're just GPU limited. Like your CPU and RAM can just sit there and chill, but we're not GPU limited in this case. I mean, look at my GPU usage now, in the 50% range, so definitely not GPU limited. But it also seems that, you know, we're still getting the similar levels of performance on a busy night at Gatwick that we used to in sim update 15. I've got to be honest, I was a little bit disappointed with this data when I kind of cut this video together and started reviewing it, because I kind of wanted the video to be like, yay, sim update 15 gives loads of FPS, but you know, I still think it's a valid video and valid results. You know, we're truth seeking here, we don't have any agenda, so I just figured it's interesting to share, and I'd be interested to hear from you, see how you're getting on with sim update 15, and if you've noticed any changes or improvements. In the release notes, I think it said that you'll get performance gains where performance would otherwise be low. But for me, this is where my performance is low, and it still kind of is. So I don't know what to say. But I think it was important to get this video out here, and yeah, be really keen to hear from you all and see how you find sim update 15 in terms of performance. So do leave a comment and let us know. Thank you very much for watching, everybody. Take the very best care of yourselves, and as always, I will see you in the next video, and happy flying.